Today, I'm going to teach you 5 things that I never invest in real life. Hello, my name is Dolf de Roos, and I've invested in real estate in 8 countries. If I add up all the investments I've been involved in, it comes to several $100 million. And there are many flavors of real estate that I've invested in: residential, commercial, and amongst commercial, there's industrial and hospitality and storage facilities and office space and retail space. But there are 5 kinds of investment that I've never invested in, and I want to go over them now. An investment is an asset or item acquired with the goal of generating income or appreciation. When an individual purchases an asset as an investment, the intent is not to consume the asset, but rather to use it in the future to create wealth. What are the 5 things that I never invest in? The first one is land. Now, land is an integral component of any real estate deal, but I will not buy land on its own. And why not? Because land on its own doesn't generate any income, unless of course you're going to graze horses there and you rent it out to a farmer. But for the most part, land is vacant. It is waiting to be used in a development, and I don't want to be a developer. Or it is someone who bought it in the expectation that they can sell it for a higher price. And in that case, they're speculating. It's like buying gold or Bitcoin. You buy it at X dollars, hoping it'll be 2 point whatever times as much in the future. Land doesn't generate income, therefore I can't justify owning it. In fact, you can't even get a mortgage to buy land because the bank's going to say, what's generating the income to pay the mortgage? And even if you could get a mortgage to buy land, the interest payments are not tax deductible because you can only deduct for income tax purposes those expenses incurred in generating taxable income. And there's no income from land. In a nutshell, I don't buy land. The second thing that I never invest in is REITs. What is a REIT? It's a real estate investment trust. And what they do is they own, operate, and finance income-generating real estate with the idea of making their investors wealthy, right? But the challenge for me is that they have an operating structure, they have a management structure that often takes a lot of the profit before they give what's left to their shareholders. Now, there might be examples of REITs that have done very well, and the REITs may do better than the share market or other investments. But in general, in my experience, when you invest in a property directly, you tend to do better than when you have this layer between you and the property of a REIT management overhead. REITs can be really tempting. I got tempted once. The properties that they were looking at buying looked really enticing, so I got involved. But here's the thing, at the end of the day, when all was said and done, I netted about 4% out of this investment. And it's no wonder, because the managers and all the other people involved had to earn their salaries, and we had to pay for their offices, of course. And when I compared that 4% with what I normally earn on a property, anywhere from 15 to 30%, why would I get involved in someone else's investment structure when I can do it myself and get 4 to maybe 8 times as much money out of it? The third kind of investment that I never participate in is called a co-op, which is short for cooperative, of course. It's a type of residential housing option that's actually a corporation whereby the owners do not own their own individual units on a strata or unit title, but rather each resident is a shareholder in the corporation based in part on the relative size of the unit they have and also its aspect, how much view it's got. And I can list quite a few advantages of a co-op, but there are also inherent disadvantages. For instance, no one's got this particular interest in keeping their unit looking good because everything is averaged out anyway. And remember, part of my game is trying to beat the average. And it seems to me that co-ops are something that encourage this averaging. I don't invest in co-ops. The fourth category of property that I never invest in is any city that has rent control. And here's the interesting thing. When governments or local bodies introduce rent controls, they don't do that to be malicious. I think they have good intent. In fact, most government regulations are introduced with good intent. However, I've devoted an entire chapter to one of my books explaining why government controls don't work. In fact, not only do they not work, they tend to have the inverse effect of that intended. So rent controls are introduced to keep rents at a low rate. And yet you'll find statistically anywhere in the world where rent control is introduced, rents tend to go through the roof. And here's the reason. Let's say you have a city like San Francisco, and we all know rents are very high, prices are expensive. So the government thinks these poor, unsuspecting, innocent, kind tenants are being screwed over by Rapacious racketeering landlords, let's put in a rent control to limit rent increases to the CPI, the Consumer Price Index. And on the surface, this sounds very fair and everyone thinks that's a good idea. But then imagine that there's an increase in value of things, land and buildings and houses and rental units. So normally the rents would go up to reflect that, but because of the rent control, they can't. So now the rents are artificially low. So investors are going to say, our returns are low here. Let's pull out of the San Francisco market and go to another city. So there's a decrease in supply and people don't tend to move around as much because then their rents would go up. So the whole situation becomes artificial. There's a black market that's developed and prices actually go up. And that's why the two cities with the greatest rent control in this country are the cities with the highest rentals, San Francisco and New York City. And that's why I would recommend that you stay away from any city that has rent controls because it will work against you. So if we talked about cities that I don't invest in, the fifth and final category of real estate that I don't invest in involves countries. And specifically, it's countries that have a history of annexing land, of taking over foreigners-owned real estate. Why would you even take the risk? Once bitten, twice shy. I would never invest and I would never recommend investing in any country that's got a history of taking land from foreign ownership. Normally, I wouldn't tell you what not to invest in, but I think in this case, it was really worthwhile explaining the sorts of investments that I never make. However, what I prefer to do is give you 101 ideas as to what you should do. And I've got it right here. This is a book called 101 Ways to Massively Increase the Value of Your Real Estate Without Spending Much Money. You can get your free copy by clicking the link on your screen. And this is full of ideas that sets you on the path, not only of just avoiding those 5 categories that you shouldn't get into, but what in fact should you be looking for? What should you be doing? This is a must read. Thanks for watching this videos, guys. I hope you learned a few useful things. And to find out even more that you can use to set yourself on a path of financial freedom through real estate, check out my next video.